This is a lecture recap for Hesiod Theogony, English 261, Mythologies. Assignments for the next class are to read Chapter 4, Ovid's Metamorphoses. Check any content in the folder, and there will be a short reading quiz at the beginning of class. We began class by talking about Beowulf, how Beowulf has in it both characteristics of oral myth and written myth. There are many passages of parataxis in Beowulf, as well as genealogies, lists of places and people, and frequent uses of formula and modular myths. At the same time, we see the rationalization and creation of an overall artistic approach in Beowulf by the final monk or scribe who puts Beowulf down to writing. So we can really see the process in Beowulf of going from the oral period of myth to the written myth. So move now here to ancient Greece. You can see on the map the city-state areas. Hesiod was originally from Asia Minor. His family moved to Boeotia, and his father had orchards and sheep. Hesiod ended up being a shepherd for a while and an orchardman. After his father died, there was a dispute in the inheritance with his brother, and this comes out particularly in the introduction to the Works and Days and his dispute with his brother, asking his brother Perseus to go by the good laws of Zeus and essentially give him what he felt he deserved. Before we get into Greek, we want to step back a little bit and talk about Proto-Indo-European. This is a chart of different words for the word hand, and Proto-Indo-European is on the far right-hand side. So the Proto-Indo-European root for the word hand was gheser, or something like that. And this has been changed and come down in different forms to be roca, handus, or in Germanic, that of course we get the word hand from in English, and ker or cher in Greek. And the point is that Greek came from a Proto-Indo-European mother language, just like all these other languages that we see on the Stammbaum. A Stammbaum means family tree. So this is a family tree of Indo-European languages, of which Greek is on our upper left-hand side, Germanic on the far right-hand side, which brings us down to modern English. The Proto-Indo-European peoples, we believe their original homeland was somewhere in the region of the Black Sea. Many hypotheses linguists believe it was north of the Black Sea, north and east. And in this area, they had a population growth because of expansion of the use and domestication, expansion of the use of cattle and pigs and sheep, and then also grains. Their populations rose, and then they spread out. So the Germanic peoples went up to the west and northwest, as you can see. The Indo-Iranian people into India and Iran, and the Greeks and So as these people spread out, they became the various Indo-European peoples, and the Greeks were one group of them. This is an alternative hypothesis where the homeland is a bit southeast of the Black Sea, and the Greeks moved through Asia Minor, the Proto-Greeks moved through Asia Minor into the Peloponnesian Peninsula. Once the Greeks were established, they were originally a farming people. They originally had oxen and herded cattle. And we see this in the ancient sacrifices to the gods, especially Zeus, about the sacrifice of the ox on the altar to Zeus, where Prometheus tricked Zeus and got him to accept the bones and fat rather than the meat. Let's see, and that way the meat could be reserved for the human beings that Prometheus wanted to feed. These are the various Greek colonies. You can see that they were expanded throughout the Mediterranean and up into the Black Sea. Myth sharing, Indo-European proto-myths. There are many myths and mythic motifs that are shared. So how does this come about? Well, one way is that as the Indo-Europeans expanded, whatever proto-myths they had would have been carried into different places. So we get the the mythic motif of slaying a dragon or attacking a dragon or a snake of some kind. We see this in India with in the Ramayana. We see this in the Germanic, especially with Beowulf, where he is killed by a dragon in the last part of Beowulf. And we have this in the Greek mythology, where Zeus attacks Typhon, the big air dragon that he has to thrust down into Tartarus, and Typhon's wind and breaths cause our problematic winds for Greek sailors into the Greek ancient period. Another way is through borrowing. So as the Greeks came into the Mediterranean, they came into contact with other civilizations, such as the Minoans and people of the Middle East who had different beliefs, and so they could get those myths from them. And we have the myths of the great Tiamat, who was defeated by Marduk, the deity of Babylon. And so these myths could have been shared that way. And then there's also the possibility, of course, of independent development of the different myths. Here's our Greek, ancient Greece again. So Hesiod, all right, 700 BC, has a very paratactic style. Okay, simple, straightforward syntax, no use of subordination and things like that. He uses a lot of formulae, lots of names, which can be confusing because he will name the same character with different names. His two main works are the Theogony and the Works and Days. And the Works and Days in particular, he won a prize for, this during a poetic contest. And we see in it philosophy encapsulated together with science and poetry. We see in him, in this, especially in the Theogony, struggling with mysteries. What could come at the very beginning? So creation from chaos, and chaos not being a mixed up mess or things going all crazy, but just, in a sense, a gap, a space in which creation took place. The first creation activities are asexual, which were described as, in some ways, being scientific. And we look at them sort of in terms of the basic elements of earth, wind, fire, and water. And then later comes sexual reproduction. And in part, we can see this as sort of the idea of an animus in all things. Thales, who was a very important mathematician, predicted the eclipse of May 28th, 585, before the Common Era. He describes water as being the underlying nature of all things, and God's being in all things. And this is sort of a way of characterizing the potent nature that exists in all kinds of things, how things can hold a spirituality and potency in some sense are brought together. In the Works and Days, of course, we have the concept of strife or competition. And Hesiod says that strife is not an only child. There are two kinds. There's good strife and bad strife. So in the good strife, we have competition in which people try to compete against each other and are inspired to do better and raise themselves up. And then you also have negative competition between fathers and sons and males and females. In the Theogony, we have again this chart here from our textbook. We can see that in asexual reproduction, we've got chaos, Erebus, and night, and then later Erebus and night mate, and through sexual reproduction produce day and space. Gaia with Uranos, or heaven, okay, and the idea of the earth and the heaven unfolding over the heaven, produces like essentially three sets of beings: the Titans, the Cyclopses, and the 300-handers, or Hecatochairae. So in the first set of creation, we've got chaos, Gaia, Tartarus, and Eros. These are sort of corresponding to the four elements in a way: chaos, water; Gaia, earth, of course; Tartarus, maybe fire; and Eros, water. Or you could look at those in different ways. I suppose maybe Tartarus is water and Eros fire. Or Tartarus is wind and Eros is fire. The earth has two names: earth and Gaia, heaven, Uranos. On the basic, we talked about the basic elements of Greek physics. Okay. Strife. So Uranus and Gaia have this relationship, and he takes the Cyclops and the 100-handers and thrusts them down into the earth. He's suspicious of them. He doesn't like them. And Kronos, Gaia doesn't like that in return. She wants her children to be out of her. So she lies with Kronos, and he castrates his father. Is it deserved? Is it necessary? Well, in some sense, it has to be, because if Gaia and Kronos, Gaia and Uranus had continued in their relationship, what all would they have created at some point? It comes to an end, their creative powers, and then other creative powers take force also. So, of course, it changes the reproduction of power and moves on to the Titans. But before that, from the genitalia of heaven, which are thrown into the sea, comes forth Aphrodite. And there she is, Aphrodite. She's the one from Cyprus, and the one who is Philomedes, who is a philo, of course, meaning love, and medes could either mean laughter or smile or genitalia. So the next generation gap is Kronos and Zeus. This is a picture of Francisco Goya's Saturn eating one of his children. So Kronos eats his children, and yet his mother Freya is able to save him and get Kronos to eat a stone instead. And Zeus is able to get the children out of his father, and eventually to defeat his father and push his father off into essentially a kind of a Greek paradise, get him to retire. In the Works and the Days, we have the strict descriptions of the Titan Prometheus, the gifts of the fire and the woman, and the 5 ages of humankind. Here's a picture of Prometheus bringing fire to humans. So in some sense, founder of civilization by bringing fire and also meat, raising us up from just sort of wandering around, living in holes, and instead having human rationality and civilization. And in some sense, that is sort of the Greeks see themselves as the holders of civilization, and the barbarians around them as being beneath them. So in some sense, they're really the patrons of the Titan Prometheus. Of course, Atlas and Prometheus both got in trouble with Zeus in this way. So here we have this cup. On the left, our left is Atlas holding up the world, and on the right there is poor Prometheus bound to the column and having his liver eaten out by the eagle every day. In the end of Works and Days, we have Pandora, which means all gift, or all gifts are in her. Many different artistic expressions have been made of this down through the ages. So your writing assignment is spend time writing your own theogony and bring it on Tuesday, and we'll read them to each other in groups.